Hi, welcome to day 2 of FCA. Today we're going to talk about 100% self and surrendering. Our verse is Galatians 2, verse 20. My old self has been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. So I live in this earthly body by trusting in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. In the last meeting, we talked about how God gave us 100% by sending his Son Jesus to live a perfect life, and then giving that life up as a sacrifice for our sins. Although it's not an equal comparison, we discussed the similarities between God's commitment to us and our commitment to athletics. But it doesn't end with sacrifice. For both the athlete and the follower of Christ, that's just the beginning. The next step is to surrender. In order for the athlete to succeed, he or she must submit to the coach's plan. It's the coach, after all, whose job is to help the athlete become the best they can be. For the follower of Christ, on the other hand, he or she must surrender personal wants and desires and submit to God's perfect plan and purpose for his or her life. But it's not just a one-time thing. It's a daily choice to trust those in authority over you and have your best interest in mind. It's all about 100% surrender of self. What does it mean to be a servant? When Jesus walked the earth, he showed us what it looked like to be a servant leader. He was a compassionate teacher who took care of the people's most basic needs. Jesus fed the masses, as it states in Matthew 14, verse 13 to 21. He healed the sick, as in Matthew 8, verse 1 through 15. He delivered the possessed, as in Matthew 8, verse 16. And he protected his disciples from harm, as in Matthew 8, verse 23 to 27. But in one instance, he took that concept of serving others to a level that stunned even his closest followers. In John 13, the story begins during the celebratory Passover supper, as Jesus draws closer to his death. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, wrapped a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he had around him. John 13, verse 4 through 5. This was typically an act that only the lowliest servant would perform. And yet here was Jesus, the Son of God, going above and beyond what anyone might expect from such a reverend spiritual leader. In that moment, he was able to teach the disciples a valuable lesson. No one is too important to serve. Years later, the Apostle Paul echoed Jesus' sentiment in a letter to some of the early Christians. Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble. Thinking of others is better than yourselves. Don't look out for only your own interest, but think of the interest in others too. Philippians 2, verse 3 through 4. Why do you think it's so surprising to see important leaders performing selfless acts of serving? Do you personally find it easy or difficult to serve others who are seen as less important in our society? Explain. Talk to someone and tell them your answers. Today's key point is we give 100% to God by surrendering our lives.